Well, hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. Today we have a different trio, Aaron, Mary, and Kevin. And this is another one of those topics that I love specifically, which is it's going to be brainy. It's going to go all over the place. But in the middle of all that, we're going to have some truth and we're going to have a major point. I know it's going to get there at some time. That topic today is nostalgia. And we're going to deconstruct in many different ways. But I think this is a feeling that we all know. And this is something that we all see, but I think as marketers, we should pay more attention to it. So to get us rolling, I'm going to pass it over to Kevin. I prepped him with something, but he may take it wherever he wants. And really, I want Kevin to kind of talk about nostalgia and specifically what it means to him.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So I think nostalgia is important for marketers specifically because nostalgia is about evoking warm feelings. It's about good memories from the past, right? And I think if you can use that to associate any kind of good feelings towards your brand or your business, that's something you need to be aware of and how you can use that. So I make TikTok content mostly around nostalgia, and whether that is media, TV shows, or movies. Sometimes they even do it about brands themselves, right? Like Tony the Tiger means a lot to a lot of people. What is Tony the Tiger other than a mascot for sugar cereal? What does he actually mean? You know, and I think that's pretty powerful. And we work with different kinds of businesses, right? Like if you work in B2B, how do you bring nostalgia into your marketing? I think that's something that we can explore here.
Well said, Kevin, and very straightforward, and I love you for it. Nostalgia, I think another idea here that I'm having, and we did not talk about, so I'm going to throw this to you, Mary, in a second, is I think there's nostalgia for certain marketing tactics and frameworks and all that as well. And as I'm thinking is, where I get my best information now is when I go back and read Ogilvy, when I go back and read breakthrough advertising. Like all these things have just worked over time. There's almost a appeal to that as well. So really, I'll just ask the same question to you, Mary. Is like, why should nostalgia matter to marketers?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Aaron. I've seen a ton of just yearning for past marketing efforts like direct mail, thank you notes, gift baskets, like what it's called is like unscalable marketing efforts, because nostalgic efforts tend to be something that you can't easily give over to software or some type of like automation. So I think that's like just so interesting that it's even kind of working its way into the B2B marketing world, is this nostalgia for past marketing efforts that worked. I mean, those efforts worked and they can still work today. But to Kevin's original point, I think you still need to have that like story behind it. Like you need to have, your brand needs to evoke some kind of warm feeling or emotion in an audience before you can start going to the tactical level, which is what we talk about a lot on purposeful marketing, which is, you know, your brand or your company, or even if you're just a one-man operation, you have to know your why before you can really start going for the tactical part.
Love it. I think that idea of the familiar is just so important with nostalgia, and we should recognize it more with marketers as it's good to do new, but sometimes the old is the most comfortable, and whatever that may mean to you. And I think as we push people to the edges, like that should be the calling for us, is like, how can I offer this familiar experience to someone? They don't need new. And I think to present this idea in a different way, as we were chatting, there's almost a pushback to new things right now. So just two examples we had is the pushback to products and being nostalgic for things of the past. And the examples, number one is how we all view subscription and cable is there's just way too many subscriptions. And we have this nostalgia for cable TV. Or maybe another experience, which I didn't offer here, is like hotels versus Airbnb. It's like now the Airbnb experience is so bad of this gig renting economy that I'd rather just go to a hotel and get a continental breakfast or something. Okay, so Kevin, if you can kind of maybe talk more about again, nostalgia, like, why does that help us buy? Or what does it make us think about buying? Like, why is nostalgia so important to make a sale?
I mean, it just connects to human nature. You know, there's nothing more powerful than have something that makes you remember good times of the past. I don't really know how to explain it any better than that. Um, like in my own life, like when Burger King like moves their logo back to the old style, I'm like, I want that. If that gives me a chance of feeling 5 years old again, that I'm going for that, right? But it doesn't really. Ultimately, they're not doing anything different. I have warm associations with a brand, with colors, with something like that. So that's what influences me to buy.
Oh, that's interesting though, Kevin. So you had to have had a really, really good past experience in order to have a good nostalgic experience, right? So
Hmm.
you almost have to like build that in. Like if you don't already have a brand or company or marketing campaign or whatever you want to call it that has that history, then you almost have to like create it now so you can create nostalgia later or something.
100%.
I love where this is going because I think because the next question I was going to ask is like, how can this even be applied to a marketing strategy? And from what we're talking about is if you don't start today doing the things that we talk about, creating demand for your product, or more of my relationship marketing point of view is like start making relationships now. And what that means, if you don't do that now, no one's going to feel nostalgic for it later. And I think that's where a lot of marketing clients that we work with is the holdup is they can't even create nostalgia because they can't even start creating new things now. Mary, you do a lot of these conversations. Just any general thoughts on that, or maybe how you apply nostalgia to your marketing strategy and plan?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it to be honest in terms of like tactical implementation. Most of our clients are the outliers. So they're competing with a big category leader. They're a small to mid-sized industrial company and they just want to break into the market or grow their business or become a better competitor. And what that often involves is like more like guerrilla style marketing, emphasis on guerrilla. Um, and just kind of like more creative ways of looking at it. So we do a lot of like brand work to your point, Aaron. So almost like building that base first of making sure they have the brand efforts in place. But that's interesting. I will think of how to implement nostalgia in future efforts.
Yeah, I think maybe what the missing piece is this is totally my own point of view is we have just moved so far into measurement and data that we forgot that the psychology that Kevin is talking about influences buying the most. So if we change that mindset again, is I need to create something so memorable that one day it's going to be nostalgic. Then I'm going to do things like create the Oscar Mayer jingle or something, right?
Mhm.
So I think that would be my thought is like again, we don't do enough probably brand building and affinity work anymore, and like how can we get back to that? Just to kind of carry the conversation on is Kevin, do you have any favorite segments you've done on marketing nostalgia? Because I mentioned the Oscar Mayer one, but is there just any other one that you like really love to do?
I love that one. I think, yeah, to your point, Aaron, like, well, first I'll address that. Yeah. So I really like the jingle stories. The Oscar Mayer one was great. Kit Kat. Um, the I like to buy the world of Coke. Um, Chili's baby back ribs. Like these are all things that when there was a time where we didn't know them super well, and now we do because of that. But all of those things almost happen not on accident, but they happen in really unexpected ways. Like specifically the Kit Kat jingle, that one was like they didn't say we're going to make a jingle that America's going to listen to. It was we have this like we need a jingle. We heard a guy he had made some commercial music before. It sounds kind of different and interesting. Let's sort of have him try something out. And they just sort of let him do his thing, trusted the process, let him be creative. And it didn't go through a million rounds of revisions. And there was some level of that because it was old school, like 80s, 90s Madison Avenue. You still had to go through some, but it wasn't like let's test this for like 4 years before we actually decide. And I think what you were getting at is true, and I think we need to think about that today, where we have leaned so much on measurement for the past 5-10 years because we have these tools available, very heavily on sales and transaction, right? Customer acquisition costs, lifetime value. But some of those things are going away. We're losing the ability to track as accurately as we have. But the idea of building a brand, building affinity, a brand lasts forever. Even if Nike did everything wrong for the next 20 years, they're still going to be able to play off of what they've built for the last 100. So you're right. There needs to be a mix. There needs to be some level of mix of taking advantage of the tools that we have available now, but also just playing off of what has worked as long as marketing has existed, and giving humans what they like.
That was such a good segment, Kevin. I'm going to cut that out and distribute that. Man, there were so many great things. I think what's really important is, earlier I asked Mary, like, what is the marketing strategy around nostalgia? And I think here it is. And then I want to hear her opinion. Is, if you're going to start a company today, would you rather focus on the attribution and measurement and be obsessed over it? Or would you rather be obsessed over the story and the narrative and making sure that this is the story that I want people to know 20 years down the line? So what about you, Mary? Say you're going to start a company today. What are you going to focus on? Is it the narrative? Is it trying to create this moment for nostalgia?
Yeah, 100% storytelling, the narrative. Like, that's what's going to differentiate brands. Now that we have these AI tools creating blogs, it's going to be like true creativity that's going to outshine everything. So if I am, hint at my future occupation, if I'm going to be head of marketing at a software company in the near future, my first investment on my marketing team is going to be creative. It's going to be a copywriter and or a designer, videographer, some type of creative investment depending on where our internal strengths are. So if we want to focus on video, it'd be a videographer. If it's content, it's going to be a copywriter. Same with campaigns. I need a really good copywriter, but creativity, storytelling, narrative, like 100%. If that's all we did and all we measured on the business was dollars in, dollars out, I know we would come out on top.
Yeah, well, maybe that'll happen to you one day, and then you can start that plan. So, yeah, something that reminded me with narratives is, and we talked about this in the episode we did, is a lot of the time it's propositioned as old way, new way. Like, I wonder if the new way is saying, like, we're going to help you get back to the old way of whatever it is. And like, almost I would want to see that in the advertising copy and concept, again, because I have such great nostalgia for cable and what it offered, which is just a single source of, this is how I get my entertainment. Another idea that I want to bring up to the group is using kind of influencers and influence, as we've been talking about. And I see this a lot now, as I think we're all millennials here. So I heard this first time in the Super Bowl, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, right? Is there's all this dialogue about, oh, all these rappers back in the day, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, like, great. Why have we never seen them in the Super Bowl before? Well, it's because it's like, that's part of our generation, our nostalgia. And now that we are the target buyers, that's a reason why they're in your face more. They're influencing you more. And you're trying to do those things, right? So that was just another idea that I was just thinking of. Kevin, any thought on that? Just like actually having nostalgia influencers.
Yeah, I mean, it got played a lot this Super Bowl as well. Like that Clueless commercial is great. Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe we'll reach a point where it's overdone and millennials have had enough of nostalgia. But I don't think we're anywhere close to it at this point. And I mean, we're seeing even Gen Z like lean so heavily into it. They're obsessed with like old digital cameras and iPods and stuff like that.
90s stuff, right? They're really into the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. Because like, I think it's just a human thing to be curious about either things that you missed out on, like barely missed out on, or things that were there that almost sort of feel like a dream, right? Like you experience them before you're fully conscious. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think bringing in influencers 100%, right? Like everybody that watched that Super Bowl, like everybody has good feelings about Snoop Dogg. We don't know anything about the man, right? Like we we don't know what's going on in his life, but we have an idea of who he is. And I think that's how influencers play. It's almost sort of it's the same as like Tony the Tiger, right? It's like having some sort of like face of a brand can be really strong. Like there are individuals that you immediately associate with a brand, but they're maybe only did one or two things with them. Um, so yeah, I think it's always going to be there.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of wrap up here because the thing I want us to take out of this episode is this thing exists. Psychology, a lot of the time, is the reason of why we buy. And this is a very big psychological influence on why we buy. And again, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40, 50 years, there's going to be some new nostalgic thing that we need to tap into. And we don't have all the answers, but maybe we can start creating those strategies here today. I think, again, what Kevin, you're doing is really unlocking that idea within me to have this conversation of there's even this marketing back in the day that I just remember so much. I don't know if I'm going to remember the SaaS in 20, 30 years. And there's something to that, but we'll keep talking about it on the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. We'll keep this short.
I have a
Yeah,
question. Aaron. I have a good nostalgic thing that's been coming up a lot recently, and like my LinkedIn post and then industrial is really focused on these, and that's trade shows and conferences. So wondering if that's kind of like a way to play up the nostalgia, right? So we were shut out of them for like 2 to 3 years, depending on which trade shows came back and which didn't. And now everyone's really excited about them. And the really cool thing I'm seeing from a nostalgia standpoint is no one's coming, none of the good brands, so none of the brands who are focused on the narrative, the storytelling, really delivering a quality product and a quality experience are doing the trade show the same way they did pre-COVID. They're all doing it a little bit differently. So we just had like Jake Hall on our Industrial Marketing Live, and he said like people are bringing pinball machines to their exhibit booths, you know, so people can play pinball or like foosball. And people are doing speaker slots instead of just exhibiting to exhibit. So I just thought that was like an interesting nostalgia piece to bring up that's kind of applicable to the B2B world.
It definitely is. And it reminds me that I think even in the marketing examples that Kevin was talking about is it's just swinging for the fences. Like we don't do that anymore. And I think Kevin, you're the one that said like we can't test everything. It's like that's the only thing we try to do is test everything. And sometimes with like trade shows and these big marketing campaigns that these old brand and design agencies that they would do, it's like maybe we need more focus and attention on that. And I understand that it's not the quickest thing to do and it's not the most measurable thing to do, but darn, is that going to be the most nostalgic thing to do at some point? And that's really what we should do. So, Kevin, you want to plug your TikTok at all about your nostalgia just before we
Yeah. Hit me up on TikTok. It's at KevinEarl93. I talk, like I said, I talk about like old 80s, 90s, 2000s media, but there's also plenty of marketing content mixed in as well. Check it out if you want to like possibly get a reminder for some TV shows you watched back in the day that you have since long forgotten. That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, your Halloween series was just like chef's kiss, like so good. If you guys go back into Kevin Earl's 93, plugging it again, into his TikTok and go to October, he did like just all these like old Disney Halloween movies, like Don't Look Under the Bed and Halloween Town, just superbly done.
Thanks, excellent. This was a fun episode. I love tackling these ideas that are just a little out there. For our listeners, DM us if you have questions. DM Kevin if you want to talk about nostalgia. Mary and I will start working on the playbooks for nostalgia. We'll figure that out. This episode will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We are taking guests. Just raise your hand. Send us an email or DM us on LinkedIn. That's probably preferred. or just let me know that you want to talk, and we're happy to do it anytime. So enjoy yourself, listeners, and go experience some nostalgia, please.